Alright, well, welcome back to Driveway. We're kind of through with the whole dealing with the disasters, and we are moving on to furthering the project. So we're not going to worry about that stuff anymore, and we're trying to focus more on making sure we get everything to the best point that we can for going to try to hit up an ice cream cruise here beginning of August. So we got our vents in. They're looking pretty snazzy. So they're not looking too horrible. There's kind of like a little flaw in their mold or anything, but anyways, they look pretty good. The hood doesn't wiggle and jiggle, so that's good for us and good for hitting some high-speed runs with this thing. One of the other reasons, part of this is for heat. Other part is because we have such a large grill intake area, and I plan on having a full under tray underneath the car, you're going to get a lot of pressure under the hood, and we don't want to be like on Rocky Mountain Race Week. There was a Jeep that was running like 160 miles an hour, and it was enough force underneath the hood to rip the hood open, breaking the standard Jeep clips to hold the hood shut. So luckily we only had the hood flip up at about 50 miles an hour. It would suck really bad if you were doing 160. So this is part for the aerodynamics and part for the heat. So we're much better than the whole stock setup, and after this has sat on here for quite some time and I've kind of gotten used to looking at it, it's looking pretty darn sharp. But we're going to move on from that, and I suppose the most recent video you watched was Box 2.0. And as you can see, the car is in the garage, so that means Box 2.0 worked pretty well. So I only have one small little leak, but that's just on the AN fitting for the fuel pump. So when we have the car jacked up for the next project here, I'll take care of that and tighten that up a little bit, and we'll be good to go. So 24 hours sitting in the garage, no drips or nothing, full tank of gas. We are sealed and we're good. So what's the purpose of this video? Well, if you're watching some of the other videos, you might have been told, probably on Box 2.0, that we got ourselves some springs sitting here on the table. So let's go take a look at what we got, and hopefully we can get rolling on this pretty soon. But it is during the week, so I've got normal work to do, and that kind of interferes with everything. But hopefully this won't take too long to video, and you'll be seeing this before too terribly long. So let's get over to the table and see what we actually have. Alright, so let's take a look at what we have here. Starters, you see off the edge, here are some SFI, a SFI harness, since that NRG one that I got was supposed to be SFI, but they sent me a non-SFI, and it was kind of too late to do anything about it when I noticed it. So we got a new one that has all the SFI tags, and we're good till June 2022. The other upside to this is I actually kind of like this cam lock design versus the NRG one. This is quite a bit smaller and probably won't be as annoying to wear. So I will throw that on off camera at some point. Shouldn't be too difficult. Probably take me an hour, just because that is a tiny car. But the real action is right out here. We got some ground control springs. Now ideally, I would have gotten the shocks that should go with it, but trying to space out purchases and everything, the whole spring and shock kit was like $1,600. So it's $1,000 just for the shocks. So I decided we should hit the springs first and worry about the shocks at a later date. So the main reason that we need shocks, springs, is one, we need it stiffer. Because when we're trying to pull the trailer, these Crossfires were never designed for any weight in the back. So you get too much weight back there, it just sinks to the ground. So let's go over some spring rates. I believe the stock Crossfire, not the SRT, they had slightly stiffer. I want to say there's something dumb like 280 pound per inch in the front and like 320 or something in the back. I don't have the numbers with me right now, but either way, they're in that neighborhood of 300 to 350 pounds per inch, which means every inch that the spring goes down, it will equal 300 some pounds. So what we went with is a much different spring rate. These guys in the front, which actually the whole tower is going to be mounted this way. So this will go up inside of the spring bucket. It's got the little rubber isolator thing. That'll go in there. Then we'll have the spring, and then we'll have the height adjustment section. So this will be down in the A-arm. So we can come through and adjust with this bolt how high or low the system goes. This is about another, what do we got? About 1.5 inches movement here. So we can dial in the specific ride height in the front. And then in the rear, we got this standard coilover style that we pretty much undo the lock here. And then we can make our adjustment. And then in the top of the spring towers on the Crossfire, there's this kind of bubble that has this, I don't know how exactly to explain it. We'll take a look at it a little bit later, but there's a little bubble that holds onto the spring to keep it from moving around, and it's got a hole in it. So this little T-bar goes up into that hole and then cinches down, clamping that on. So these are going to be kind of upside down like that. You can see the words there. They're going to be upside down in the rear, but that should work pretty decent there. We got some sizable movement there. It's like I really wanted these because that way we can have a low ride height for track days and all that type of stuff, for street driving and kind of giving it a good stance on there. But then when we go and switch over to the drag tires, we need a little more room to make sure that the tires don't rub against anything. But I guess now that we've put it off for a while, let's talk about spring rates. Now, I did not go with drag racing spring rates because my main focus is not going to be on drag racing. It's like I'm making this thing for a multi-purpose, so I can go to the local street race course, which we've got a race course a couple miles down the road. So run on the road course, be able to run drag races, which at our course down there, they have kind of Friday night grudge race where street tires only. So we can do drag racing, we can do course race. And then one of the other big events that I like going to out here in Nebraska is there's a Sand Hills open road race. That's a point-to-point, kind of like a Silver State Classic, where you've got a certain mile per hour average that you need to hit, and you just go from a point to point and try to keep that average. So you can be upwards of a 240 mile an hour class where you have to go for like 100 miles point to point and do it all while maintaining an average speed of 140 miles an hour. So we wanted multi-purpose everything. I'm not looking to light the world on fire and make all the world records and all that type of stuff, so we are sticking with a middle ground, which once you hear these spring rates, it's not going to be a middle ground. But anyways, the rear spring rate, I went with a 650. So that is from the stock of 300, we are a good double. So what that also means is what we got the car to do when we put the trailer on. It's like we put the trailer on and the car sank, let's call that an inch and a half. With these, it's only going to drop like 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to be sitting really nice with that. And if it drops it a little bit too much, we've got height that we can just lift the car up, raise up an inch, set her back down, and we are ready. The other upside, because we're running the trailer that will drop it 3/4 of an inch, we can dial in our drag race height before we take off. So we won't have to adjust it for when we put the trailer on, take it off and everything. We'll be at one height with the drag slicks, and then we can just put the street tires on, throw the trailer on, and it'll bring it down to the approximate ride height that we want. Then on the front, we went to a serious 1,000. So that's going from barely a 300 in the front to 1,000. 3 times the amount of spring rate. So what that is good for is, one, we do have a cast iron V8 in the front with a cast iron turbo. So we have more nose weight than previously. So that would make you go up at least 100. So that'd bring you to about 400, give you about that stock spring rate. But if you are talking about trying to pull a corner on a road course, you are going to put a lot of pressure on the front springs. They're what's going to handle all the turn in and everything. So we're going to need higher there. And then once we put on a front splitter, same with the back ones here with a big wang on it, the whole car itself is going to start settling down lower on the frame and everything. So we need all this extra spring rate to combat corner speed and to combat downforce that we throw on there so we can maybe hit up some amateur time attack. That'd be kind of fun to do as well. So that's what we're going to do with these. And it's going to start once we tear open the Crossfire here and start going to town on the old springs. For you, that's going to happen in about 30 seconds. For me, that'll probably be another day or two. Because I kind of I need time to actually do it. Alright, so essentially there's a couple ways that we can go about taking the springs out. Like, depending on the amount of tools that you have laying around, one approach, well, all approaches, you have to remove the A bolt from the shock, whether it's from the top or the bottom. And we're going to have to remove the end link connection for the sway bar. So above all else, we got to get those off first. And then you're going to enter how you're going to get everything back out. So let's spit this off here real quick. So that should make that thing run free. Then one other thing. So essentially, since we got the shock unhooked and that piece unhooked, now you have to figure out how to get enough movement either out of the suspension arm or be able to compress the spring. What a lot of people will do at this point is remove the 2 bolts from the A arm and then drop the A arm. But from my side, this 1 bolt here for the ball joint there for the upper link looks like it's more my style. So we will just yank this thing out. Just rely on it undoing. So we gotta there it goes. The real question is, how badly did we mess up the bolt? Nut looked like it fared halfway decent. Alright, anyways, we've got that undone. So we can pretty much drop that. So now this brings me to, the spring is mostly undone, but we don't have much brake line movement, because that's not really high on the real estate. I'm really not in the mood to re-bleed brakes, so we will just, let's grab ourselves a spring compressor here. Snake the bottom one in next. Alright, so that piece is off. Now we're ready for the new stuff. Now, one of the other things that you probably could have done is if you had like a torch and you knew you weren't gonna ever use those springs again, you could have heated up one of the coils and then partially collapse the coil, then do this process, and it would probably come with completely out without the need of the spring compressor. Or if you also don't have the spring compressor, you can always do the main bolts on there. But I've always had a bear of a time trying to get these bolts to line back up on other vehicles, so I try not to. Anyways, hey, these are still the stock Mercedes shocks. It's like the rear has KYBs in them. These guys are stock. Oh well, we'll upgrade them at some point. But anyways, back to the ground control system here. It's like we gotta put the, I guess they call them spring jack. That'd be this guy here. Let's pan ourselves down. So you can see our little bucket here where the, focus, okay. So that's where the old coil sat. And now these coils are quite a bit smaller in diameter. So there's this piece that basically sandwiches in on the underside. So we'll feed that in. Get ourselves lined up there. Get that cranked in. And then there is a clip ring that goes on top to make sure nothing vibrates and rattles out. So a quick clip like that. That's not going anywhere. Then we'll screw back in our spring jack. Somewhere around there is bottom. That's in there. And then up top is just this guy that slides up into that bucket hole. Alright, let's pause the install right here and have a news flash. Don't forget to remove the doohickey. This is a rubber isolator on the spring of the stock one. Make sure to remove that before that piece goes up into the spring tower. Otherwise, you'll have a problem. You'll see that at the end. From the future. So I'm just going to hold these guys there. Give her a little push. And we are in business. Now we just grab our jack here and put some pressure back on the A-arm. Guess now we need to try to set this thing down and see how screwed up our height is. Worst case scenario, we'll have to get a different set of springs. Best case scenario, it works perfectly. Okay. I don't know what they were thinking. We got ourselves a lift on this pig. Okay, I thought something was kind of up. That is no bueno. All right, well that's a lot better. And what did we learn from this? Take your doohickeys out. Anyways, that's it for the front. We're gonna head to the back and see if that's any easier on that aspect. So let's get rolling. All right, so on the rear side, we got a slightly different setup. What I'm going to do, this step isn't necessary, but I'm going to remove this plastic piece. It's just a couple 10 mil bolts here and here, and then it just clips off. Mine are heavily beat up, so they'll probably stay off. But what this ends up doing is it allows you to have a flat spot on this control arm. So you have a place to put the jack. There. This way, we don't have to worry about tension and it sliding off of the jack or anything like that. That's a bummer. I don't know what size that is. All right. Okay, that is off. Now, This is going to be much easier than the other side, the front, because all that we have to do is there's a big bolt down here at the bottom of the whatchamacallit, the thing. Interesting. And it looks like I didn't even have the nut on this side. Well, anyways, take out the bolt. Knuckle, that's the word I was looking for. Then you essentially just have to... Okay, once we got that kind of free of the control arm, we can just drop that whole control arm. And out comes the spring. Just as simple as that. Get our spring set. It's got the bottom piece that has the hole right there for it. Jacks right in there. And then the top side has this little T-bolt that you can see right here. It'll flip up into it. So you get it hooked up in there. And then you'll weasel the other side up in there. Pretty much like that. Then it's in there, and then you'll just crank it down. Although the thought process behind this whole setup is pretty decent. I have found there to be a minor failure. And that is, they use a nylock. Now the problem is, it'll thread on perfectly fine, but then when it starts to lock out, your T-bar is just gonna start spinning and spinning and spinning. And there's nothing up in there to help hold it. So you just have to hope that you're bolted on good. But what I have done, I just have a standard non-locking nut. That way there's pretty much zero resistance in the nut movement. So that way it's a lot easier to spin this guy up tight. Get that in there tight, and then we run our nylock nut. That way it prevents everything from rattling out. Alright, then that is in. We shove our spring right up in this piece. Alright, now we gotta weasel the knuckle back into the control arm. Probably gonna take a little hammer persuasion. Get that bolted back together, then we can get that back in. Alright, so there it is. I lifted it up a little bit because I wasn't going to have enough clearance for the drag slicks. But looks like it would be 1/2 inch drop with this particular one. You can order more drop because they would just give you like an inch shorter spring and you'd have another like 2 or 3 inches drop. But this is good for what we want. So all in all, not too bad. 1/2 hour for the back, maybe 45 minutes for the front. A decent day's work. I don't know, definitely looks pretty good. Alright, so that's enough for today. We got those springs taken care of. Those are all in. We are good to fly there. So we have very little left to do to the Crossfire. I am a utter mess. It's hot, sweaty, and the ground was not clean. So I'm gonna go take a shower and we'll just have to see you back here sometime later.